Welcome back to Wish for Death Island's Population Me, and if you'll recall, I mentioned a little while ago that Twitter has a lot of weird stories unfolding on it right now. I've seen a few things like creepy Twitter accounts and cursed images and weird voicemails over Twitter for the past few years, but the one that I actually followed for quite a while was the Dear David saga that ran from August 2017 to around June 2018. I didn't follow the entire thing, but I recently just kind of remembered it and decided to revisit. I think that this might be the first major Twitter-based story that blew up the way it did in terms of horror ARG content, so it's interesting to come back to in this way. Now before we start, I understand that even though Adam Ellis, the author of this, says it's all real, it does come across as an ARG to me. If you're familiar with those, I'll just say it's like an interactive story that hinges on staying in character and immersion, so it basically looks like it's real when it obviously isn't. Kind of like role-playing, I guess. They're fun. But I wanted to say that because even though they're fake, you always get stupid people saying, "Oh my god, do you guys know it's fake?" and trying to interrupt everyone else's fun to let everyone else know how smart they are. So in the interest of immersion, I'm going to be pretending that it's real to discuss it in the most fun way possible while I present the timeline. But then towards the end I'll just be talking about some of the ways that I think things were pulled off, like effects and whatnot, because I think it's fun to talk about the production. So our story begins with Adam Ellis. He used to work for BuzzFeed, but now he does his own thing. At the time of the story, he works for BuzzFeed. So this is also not about him as a person, but purely about the story, so I'm not going to delve into any of my personal opinions about any of his hot takes or political views. We're just going to enjoy the ghost story. On August 7th of 2017, he tweets that he thinks that there is a ghost in his new apartment and decides to make a thread explaining what happened to make him believe this. There's a green chair that you should become familiar with in his bedroom that the entity seems to gravitate towards because the entity will sit there and rock in it while Adam has his nightmares. Adam had a dream once where he was in the library and a girl comes up to him saying, "Dear David is a dead boy who appears at midnight, and if you ask him 2 questions he will give you the answers, but if you try to ask him a third he will kill you." I guess he's just one of those girls on Facebook who posts about how she has such a bad day but gets mad when you ask her about it. He shows us the boy has a caved-in head, and that was most likely something to do with the cause of his death. Either that or he's just a galaxy brain of the highest order. Adam then confirms this by saying he had a dream where David was sitting on the chair and Adam asked 2 questions. David explains he died in a store and a shelf fell on his head. Adam, despite being warned not to, asks a 3rd question, which isn't answered. He wakes up scared and realizes his mistake, but nothing really happened. Then, because he remembers what David had said, he Googles for any deaths involving stores or just in general for any kids that had something collapse on them. He even uses variations of the name David because he just doesn't find anything. There's nothing about a David who died in a store. A few weeks later, after nothing happens, the apartment above Adam is vacated, so he decides to move up there. The layout of his building is a duplex with a business on the side, and you can see the roof of that business when you look out on the kitchen and dining room windows on the 2nd floor of the duplex. A month or 2 goes by again, and nothing happens, and Adam just assumes that because he moved, David won't bother him anymore. That is, until it comes back. Adam has 2 cats. The one with the white in particular is the one that seems to be the most sensitive to this kind of activity, and his name is Maxwell for reference. The cats stop at the front door at exactly midnight and stare at the bottom gap as if there is something on the other side. This has been happening for around 4 nights, and on the night of August 6th, Adam looks through the peephole and he thinks he sees something. He doesn't know what, but when he goes out into the hallway and puts the light on, there's nothing there, so he decides to leave it alone. He does note that when he closes the door, the cats are even more freaked out. On August 8th, he also makes an update on the next few nights. Then when I look at this, I think that the cats are backed up further away from the door. In the first picture they were very close, they were trying to get as close as to the gap underneath the door as possible, but in this one they look like they're just watching the door in general. I think this comes across as whatever is out there coming further towards the door, so they're starting to view the door as the thing that's wrong, because the thing is like right outside of it. If that makes any sense, that's the way that it comes across. He provides a video of this, and the cats are sniffing around the sides of the door as well as the bottom, so I definitely think that there's something much closer there than there was before. So Adam decides to take a picture through the peephole this time because he again thinks he saw something, but he wasn't able to quite catch it. This is a picture taken with his phone. Later on, you'll see pictures taken that are Polaroids, but I'm making the distinction now. In this picture, we can see some black smoke sort of hovering around by the banister. He also understands that this might look like the smudge on the peephole, so he takes another picture to clearly show that this isn't the case. There is a big blob in this one that isn't in the next one. So something is outside in the hallway. He finally decides that he's going to go out, but sees nothing, and dead bolts the door and goes to sleep, even though his cats are still out there by the front door watching it. On August 9th, he posts an update thread and says that he's alive, and he tested his apartment for things like carbon monoxide so he can make sure it's not something that he's hallucinating. He's confirmed that it's not from him. He also assures us that it's not viral marketing, because he did have a book coming out around the time, but says that it isn't anything that's to do with that. He says later on that the night is very quiet, so he decides to download an app that records noises in your sleep, for people who sleep talk and stuff like that. He decides to use it to see how it'll go, but he isn't really expecting to see much, and says that this is the routine for them at this point, sitting and looking at the door. Luckily, on the 11th of August, we do get those recordings that have apparently gotten some very interesting things. There are around 30 of them total, but only 3 of them have things that he can't explain. The rest of them are the noises that the cats make, and him in his sleep, and just things that you would expect. So for the first recording, we get snapping and a small stepping noise. He says he didn't get up that night either, so it's not him. It's either a ghost or the crackhead down the street wanted to have a visit. The second recording was a strange electricity noise that is like a rumbling static, and this is the only time that that is heard in any of the recordings. The third recording directly follows this one, and it's just another snapping noise. This all happens between 2 and 3 a.m. He promises to post more if anything else happens and says that he's buying ghost stuff, like a sage and a Ouija board, and he's leaving for the day tomorrow. This is me interjecting, but that shit on Amazon looks really fucking cheap, but it still looks better than the shit that Zach Baggins uses. It's like this guy might just go buy a shitty plastic flashlight, but Zach Baggins will show up with a light bulb taped to a crack pipe and act like that's like a professional thing to use. So on the 12th of August we get a selfie and him saying that he's leaving to go out. Nothing big here. August 13th rolls around and weird things have apparently started to happen again. This is when he says the phrase, "take it with a grain of salt," which alludes to the fact that strange things are getting more and more far-fetched and he isn't entirely sure if it's him. I think it's more of a comment on his mental state as well, because even though he double-checked that there's nothing making him hallucinate, he's starting to unravel at this point, and towards the end of the series he does just wonder whether or not it's all in his head, so some of it is starting to come through at this point. He says that he ended up buying a Polaroid camera and when he was out because they're fun, and decided to take pictures not really seriously. He just thought it was gonna be entertaining and he didn't really expect to find anything. However, he did. The pictures in the house are all fine, but when he took a picture of the hallway, it's completely black. He then wonders whether or not his finger covered the lens or something along those lines, so he takes a picture doing that, and it comes out completely different. There isn't really a way for him to take a picture that is just black. It's just wrong. It doesn't look right. He opens a fresh pack to see if maybe it just developed wrong or it didn't develop at all, but everything is white. It doesn't start off black. So it's obviously not something that's wrong with the camera, or any of the refills for that matter. With all of this in mind, he decides that he's going to film himself taking a picture of the hallway to really show you what's happening and watch everything develop. He takes a picture of inside his house and leaves that to develop. He shows us taking a picture out in the hallway. He steps into the frame of the door. He then watches the thing. He watches it develop so we can see that it just comes out this way. Someone else suggests that instead of standing in the doorway, he should have the doorway in frame so that he can really see what's going on and see if this affects whether or not the hallway is still black. So he decides to step back and take one picture with his phone, one picture with the camera. In the picture with his phone, it's normal, but the Polaroid shows this big solid wall of blackness out in the hallway. It just cuts off like a void. So he comes away from this realizing that the Polaroids are obviously getting something that the iPhone and Adam himself aren't. On the 14th, he says that he was burning sage in his apartment and in the hallway, but it doesn't really seem to be working. He can't help but think that something is wrong. The next day, on the 15th, he has another dream about David. There was a lot of smoke in his dream, but he could just see David sitting on the chair across the room. David looked shrunken, and when Adam woke up, he was thinking about it as a bad omen. Because the fucking hallway turning into a void of hell isn't enough of a bad omen for you, I guess. It's just the usual. That looks like my fucking mental state. On the 16th, he discovers that a few people on Twitter pointed out something he hadn't seen before in the Polaroid. There's a face just at the bottom. He also realizes that there might have been a face in the selfie that he took on the 12th of August, specifically in the back where the door is reflecting here, but it could easily be a reflection. I don't see the one in the selfie, it's just kind of a blur. On the afternoon of August 21st, Adam says that some stuff just happened that have made him feel like he really isn't unsafe at his home. Everything else was kind of just odd, but this time it's dangerous. On Friday there was a storm. He fell asleep pretty early and had a dream where David was dragging him down an old abandoned warehouse by the arm. David was really strong and Adam wasn't sure why he didn't fight back, but dream logic. He tried to brush it off when he woke up, but noticed that there was a bizarre bruise on his arm. He says that there could be a logical explanation. He could have bruised it yesterday and not really noticed it, and when he was asleep it could have come out in a dream. But he thinks that it's weird anyway. He also explains that when he goes out to get coffee every morning, there are a bunch of food carts that are really busy all the time. But when he went out this time, it was as if they'd never been there. Everything was empty and gutted. The only thing that was there was a green chair in the warehouse. On his way back from coffee, the warehouse had been shuttered. On the 25th, there was another thread by a very scared Adam. The cats are now gathering earlier by the door. They started gathering at 10 PM now instead of midnight and crying at the door. They cry for about 15 minutes and then leave. One of these 10 PM sessions went for around half an hour, and afterwards Adam started getting a number of unmarked phone calls. In the screenshot he shows there are about 6 or 7. He answered one of them because he thought that maybe it was a telemarketing bot, and when you answer they usually stop calling you, but it didn't stop. When he did pick up, he says that he heard a strange static noise like in the second recording. It went for around a minute, and then they might have been breathing afterwards, but it was too soft to really be sure. He heard a small voice say hello. Not as a greeting or a question, but as a flat statement. This freaked him out, and he hung up. He put on all of the lights in his apartment, closed all the curtains, and stayed up all night watching TV because he was too scared to do anything else. He feels like he's losing his mind. If you look at everything that has happened as individual events, they don't look too weird. Each of them could probably have logical explanations, but he says that putting them all together in the way that they've been these past couple months, it's too freaky to ignore and he can't just brush it off. The only thing he can do is write it down. On the 28th of August, he moved the green chair out of his bedroom and has been moving it around the living room ever since. He doesn't really think that getting rid of it is going to do anything to help, so he decides to just keep it. In 3 weeks, he's going to Japan on vacation and thinks that the vacation might help because when he first moved up here, David couldn't find him for a while. So maybe the vacation will trick David into thinking Adam has just moved away. He doesn't sound convinced, but it's something that will make him feel better. He also gets a pet monitoring camera. It's like a nanny cam to check on the cat. It gives him alerts over Wi-Fi and can be accessed 24/7. He shows an example, but he blurs out the company name because he doesn't think that they want to be associated with this mess. He tested it out during the weekend while he was away for the night, and he got alerts about his cats, but otherwise it was fine. Normal things. That is, until around 11 PM. He got an alert, and nothing was on the feed at first, so he just brushed it off. But then when he watched it back 2 more times, he realized what was wrong. The green chair rocks for a while, but the thing is, the windows weren't open at all. He has the air conditioning on, but that wouldn't randomly have a gust strong enough to move the chair. This freaked him out, and he then got another alert. There's a turtle shell above the bookcase right here. He picked it up when he was visiting his family in Montana and hung it on the wall. He sees it being knocked down behind the bookcase, seemingly out of nowhere. He also thinks that this blue chair over here had disappeared, but people told him that it's just the shadows and it's actually still there, and when he went over to check in his apartment when he got home, he was just losing his mind over it. So he decided that it was too late for him, he took a Xanax, and he went to bed. On September 5th, it started happening again. He was going over the camera feed from the weekend. This is now a routine because he wants to catch everything in his apartment. Something weird happened on Saturday, specifically something with the cats. Maxwell seems to jump over something invisible and then stares at it, startled according to Adam. Adam also clarifies that there weren't any bugs in the house, so it can't be that, and even if it was, Maxwell doesn't react that way to bugs, he eats them. He also shows another video of Maxwell repeatedly going up on his hind legs and watching something, and then he swats at whatever the something is and just stares at it tensely. Adam thinks that something made its way into his apartment and can't really explain how he's feeling, but he knows something is wrong. On the 11th of September, he explains that he has 3 locks on his door and doesn't really know why, but it's become part of his routine to lock all 3 of them. He feeds the cats, brushes his teeth, and then goes to bed after doing so. On his way to the pantry one night, he heard a loud crack and says that it's better to watch the feed to really understand what happened. It shows this knitted cactus in a terracotta pot falling down, in the same way that the turtle shell did, just out of nowhere. It's now broken. He says after this he checked the locks about 4 times, and the cats were all in the bedroom anyway, so they couldn't have done it. Plus the feed would have showed if they were interfering somehow. He then adds that he leaves for Japan in 2 weeks and tries to brush it off, saying that he lives next to the subway line and maybe that's why it's happening. On September 16th, he's been plagued by nightmares. They're way more vivid than any others that he's had, and he can't explain how strange they are. He took a nap in the afternoon, and in the dream he was in bed. He rolls over to see the pillow next to him, a severed head and a bloody spine occupying it. After he woke up, it was dark outside, and quiet. The other dreams mostly involve things like dark figures in the windows, even though that's strange because Adam lives on the 2nd floor. He is also confused because they don't relate to the stuff that's happening in his real life at the moment, they're just ominous. He went out to get a snack from the bodega after feeling uneasy, and he noticed on his way back there was a thud on the warehouse shutter from the inside. He got curious, but he can't exactly open it, so he finds that there's a grate that he can't reach, and decides to find a way to look inside. He can raise his phone above his head and snap a picture, and then look at it afterwards, putting the flash on so he can see in the darkness, and he's too scared to check the photo until after he calms down and eats when he goes home. It's just some old insulation, a filing cabinet, and a leather desk chair. He sees a face there that looks like it could be David, but he feels like he's going crazy again because it could easily be a blur, like on that selfie. On the 22nd, he says that he's leaving for Japan in a couple days, and things have been quiet recently. He's going to have to go and have a good time, and he thanks everyone for making him not feel alone. Then he was wandering around in Japan and found this statue, taking pictures of it from different angles because he found it interesting, and found this. A kid with a dent in his head, and it makes him feel anxious. Then we skip ahead to October 14th, where he is back home and now having electricity issues in his house. In the hallway there are 2 light bulbs, and both have gone out. He decides to leave it alone because he doesn't really want to get the ladder and interfere, but in his apartment, he has a TV that has a backlight. The backlight is activated by a USB. It only works when the thing that it's plugged into is on, so he is surprised when it starts flickering when the TV is clearly off. He noticed it in person when he was getting water. He got back to bed and then noticed it again, and went out to watch it. It went off and on for a while before it just burned out and just stopped working entirely. He finds this strange because it was only a couple months old. He couldn't sleep, so he goes out to the only diner nearby that's open at 4 AM, and when he gets back home, he takes a shower and decides to go to work early. The sun is up at this point, so it's not as bad. Yet when he comes out of the shower, he thinks he hears a faint scratching noise at the door. He took a picture instead of going out there himself and says nothing is in it, but then goes back and thinks he sees David. He thinks that now he should get someone else involved. On the 26th of October, he apologizes for the radio silence and says a lot of strangers, ghost hunters, mediums, have been asking him if they could come in and investigate. He doesn't want strangers in his house, and he decides to bring a friend over to sage the apartment. It only really worked for about a week, until he passes the warehouse once again. The shutter was open and there was a hearse on the inside. The warehouse has been closed for 2 months now, and no one is around, so why is it open? And that was when everything started escalating again. On the night of October 25th, he was watching TV on the couch around 11 PM and then decided to go to the dining room to get a drink, noticing that the cats were staring out the window. If you recall, the kitchen and the dining room look out onto the roof of the business next to it. He didn't see anything out there, but when he went to the kitchen, he looked out again and saw a figure standing on the roof. He ducked down and turned the light off, but the picture he took was too blurry. By the time he actually went to get another proper picture, the figure was already gone. He's pretty sure it's David. On November 6th, Adam notes that it had been 4 months since the entire thing started, since the first dream. But now he has the dream again, although with some minor changes. The green chair is moved out of the room, so David now sits in an old recliner, and he's watching Adam as usual. But this time, Adam is not completely immobile. He can move his hand. David glares at him and struggles off the recliner like it's some huge effort, but decides to come forward anyway. Adam figures that he's about to die, but decides that he's going to take some pictures. David was mumbling something Adam couldn't hear, and then crawled up on the bed. When Adam woke up, he tried to brush this off, and went to work, but later noticed that he had photos from last night on his phone. November 17th, Adam explains that he's been quiet, because he's trying to investigate things and doesn't really know what else to do. He recently found a secret part of his building that he had no idea was there. It began when he heard bangs and scrapes from above, which made no sense because there's no real way to get onto the roof, and it didn't sound like it was coming from the roof, it sounded like it was coming from right above his ceiling. It also wasn't a pipe or old building noises, these were alien, deliberate. They were thumps. He went out into the hallway and then remembered there's always been a hatch there. And it also doesn't really make sense because the stairway makes it so that you can't access it unless you have a ladder. He does some maths and realizes that there's a 3-foot gap between the roof and the ceiling, meaning there's some sort of space up there. And he can't get to the hatch because of the stairs. He initially brushes it off as insulated space, but he keeps hearing more noises from up there, so he assumes that there's something strange going on. One thing to note in particular is when he's in the kitchen, he hears a thump, and then something drops onto the floor and rolls about 6 feet. On the 28th of November, he's away for Thanksgiving, so he finally has time to update us on what's been happening. He kept hearing the crashing sounds from the roof, he heard it about 15 times in a row, and then he heard something from the hallway that he registered as a footstep but he wasn't sure. He heard another crash and decided that he was going to run out of there, but then stopped and realized that he had to pass underneath the hatch to get out of the building and decides to just stay inside instead. He doesn't remember falling asleep, but he wakes up to a massive crash above him, and feels a strange energy. He places his phone on the wardrobe in the hallway so that he can film himself poking the hatch open with a pole. He also notices when he goes down the stairs that there's a bunch of debris right under where the hatch is. There's something sticking out of the hatch. He had to poke it to find out, and the thing fell out. It was an old leather shoe. It looked very small, like it belonged to a child, and also very old. He decides that he's going to call the landlord and explain everything, and hours later the landlord shows up with a ladder to check it out. The landlord pokes a flashlight in there and says that there isn't anything up there, but then pauses and finds a green marble, tossing it to Adam. He thinks that there's nothing wrong with this and leaves, and Adam just takes the marble and goes to his office inside. He says that it could be really old, because in the 1900s they were made with big metal scissors by hand. On December 12th, he says that he wants to update everyone, because he's not feeling good and hasn't been feeling good for a while. He thinks to get his ears checked because he feels dizzy all the time and he sleeps the days away. He woke up on Wednesday thinking someone was watching him, but he was alone. He also had a really bad feeling and says that this is the feeling that he associates with David being near. He initially thought that maybe David was a spirit that needed help, but all he feels is malice. He feels like he woke up just missing something when he wakes up the second time, like as if a candle had just gone out and he just missed it but he can still smell it. So he decides to get an app that takes a photo every 60 seconds, because he can't really get the nanny cam in there because of the cable. He goes to sleep after setting up his phone, and he wakes up to 350 photos. First 100 are fine, but suddenly David is in there. David collapses onto the chair and stays there for several photos looking at the ceiling. Then he's gone. But then 15 photos later, he's next to the bed, staring at Adam, then looking at the camera. Adam is really scared at this point but forces himself to look through the rest of them. There's nothing else after this, but then, in the last photo, David is right next to the camera, just below it. January 2nd, 2018 is our next update. Adam says that he has been out of the city because he's been staying with his family in Montana for the holiday. Initially, he didn't think moving out would help because David would just follow him, or that's what he assumed. But as soon as he was out of that place, he started feeling really good. He felt peaceful, he felt like he could figure this out, and he even started looking for a new apartment anyway. However, he went to the bathroom one night and thought that he felt someone watching him through the window. It was too dark outside, but he figured since it's Montana, there are animals everywhere, so that's probably what it was. The next morning, he saw some animal tracks and just decided that he was right. But the next night, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye when he experienced the same thing. He was staring out for a bit and didn't notice anything, but then he saw something to the right dip out of sight. He came back to look in the morning and saw small footprints that he followed all the way to where they disappeared in the ditch out back. He started feeling nervous and feels like he's at square one again. Nothing is really working. He says that he feels David at night, watching from different corners of the room and on the ceiling, coming closer. But Adam wakes up before anything bad happens. Adam has also been using the app again for photos, but nothing has really been turning up until last night, when he dreamed of David crashing down on him from above. When Adam looks at the photos in the morning, the last one is of a blur crashing down on him. We jump to January 16th of 2018, where he says that he has been feeling good for a while, besides a few things. Just missing time, like he zones out and then he realizes that an hour has gone by but he can't account for it. And says that sometimes he'll ask someone to repeat what they've said, but they just tell him they've never said anything. But lately, he started feeling like something was wrong. He posted 3 pictures to Instagram of him and his friend getting lunch, completely innocuous photos. But when he went on Twitter, he realized that he had many more notifications than usual. The vast majority of them are people saying that they found something really strange on the 3rd photo. This picture appears to be corrupted. He has no idea how this happened and swore that it wasn't like that when he posted. But he then notices that his face has what appears to be David glitched over the top of it. He thinks it's weird, but he's too tired to really care anymore. We don't hear from him again until the 28th of January, where we get an odd post. See, so far, Adam posts with full sentences, commas, capitalization. It's pretty readable. He also adds lengthy captions when he posts things that are other types of media. He doesn't just post something without context. This time, however, he has a video of Maxwell from a very odd angle with no explanation. Like, Adam was lying on the floor watching the cat. It just looks odd. There's also something by the door which is later revealed to be a drawstring bag. Maxwell is staring at the door again. He goes silent until February 3rd, where he posts an "everything is fine" tweet in lowercase, completely unlike how he usually types, and there's an odd double spacing between fine and is. On February 6th, he has a normal thread announcing he's leaving BuzzFeed, but then he follows this up on the 13th, saying that everything will go back to the way it was before, in the same strange way that he doesn't post like usually. On the 13th, we also have a video of his cat, again, doing the same thing. Keep in mind that both of these videos were posted just after midnight. So then we get to June 6th, and he says that he has to work on other projects. And that's the ending of the story. We don't get anything else. Okay. So I was initially waiting to see what would happen, and I figured that it's been more than a year at this point, and it seems like it's just done. Since we're at the ending, I just wanted to mention a couple things. Firstly, a lot of people have been speculating on the way that he tried to manipulate the pictures. I just know that there's been some photoshopping going on, and I don't really care too much about how it was done. That just seems like it's a pretty easy thing to do. But the thing that I thought about was when he went out into the hallway to take a picture, we never saw the front of the camera, so I just assume... I wanted to mention that I think he put something out the front of the camera so he couldn't show it to us, and that's how the picture developed as black, because it's not all in the same video. It's very choppy, and it's easy to just replace the lens with something else. Again, just a production thing. But I wanted to talk a bit about this as the first real big Twitter ghost story first, because there was some other story that I can't remember the name of, where, you know, someone found something in a picture and then they were like haunted by someone. I can't remember the fucking name of it. This is like the first one to get really popular from what I remember. I understand that this might just have been started as something fun. I feel like if it was around Halloween or something, I would definitely probably fuck with people in that way, because it is a fun thing to do. There are a couple cardinal sins of ARGs that I wanted to bring up because it kind of annoyed me. As someone who was kind of following this when it started, and it just, to come back to it and have it peter out this way. If you start doing a story like this, you kind of need to find a way to end it. I think that because of how long these stories take, oftentimes it'll take months to update because it's trying to emulate something that's happening in real life, and you also have to realize that it's a side project that is worked on in between real life things. It reminds me of when the Ben Drowned saga, which is like a gaming creepypasta if you haven't seen that, was going on. The creator ended up coming out saying they didn't have enough funding and they needed to get more of it to continue, so they broke character to ask for help. And Stuff like that happens from time to time. But I just find it a bit sucky that he didn't actually come up with an ending. Because he announced that Dear David was going to be made into a movie or something. I don't know where that's going, but there's no real ending besides that. I think that his way of saying he's moving on to other projects means that he's just kind of putting it away because he doesn't have anything else to say about it. It was kind of frustrating just to follow it for so long and then have that happen. Another thing is that the rules of it didn't really go anywhere. I assume that perhaps there was something leading up to the fact that he asked David 3 questions at the beginning and David didn't kill him, so maybe he was planning to do something with that, but it didn't go anywhere. So I'm left wondering what the significance of those rules were. Whether or not it was just random contrived ghost rules that you'd get in like a Conjuring movie or something. Just was strange to me. I assumed that that was the place that David died somehow, but I didn't really understand the significance of the green chair either. I thought that those things would be explained in the way that he died, but I don't expect everything to be explained in a story. I think that it's better in a horror story to have things that are just left because they'd be more terrifying that way instead of explaining it. But that doesn't mean that everything should just be abandoned. At the end of the day, I still enjoyed myself reading through all of these things, even if it had a shitty ending. The good thing is that there are a lot more popular stories going on at the moment that will actually have a conclusion. I hope to take a look at those at some point, but I think I'll need a break from looking at these after. I hope that you enjoyed a little visit to Wish for Death Island's archives, but I'm going to close them for now. So I'll see you next time.